that set to record automatically. So thank you for noticing that.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. I'm Aaliyah, like they said already. I am policy manager for PJC and ALIPO. I'm glad that everyone could be here and make it with us today, as it's our first meeting of the year. And I just hope everybody stays engaged and listen to the message that is being passed on today. And I'll pass it to Marisha.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisha. I am the comms manager. A lot of you came from social media posts and emails and everything like that. So thanks for the response. We're happy to have you here. I'm going to pass it on to Rev or Kyle or William, whoever comes next.
Now, it is me, and I wanted to come in and just give you all a welcome. Again, thank you for being with us. I believe that we are getting ready to hear some powerful words of instruction for us coming through Mr. William. I also believe that our partners, our Gulf South partners, are also joining the call and have some real good things for us in forms of what they're up to. I do want to tell you all that next week I will be in Florida, actually touring Florida. I plan on hitting Orlando, then going to Tampa, and then going to Panama City, talking from resilience to restoration. We've got quite a few communities in Florida, as well as some workshops lined up that we'll be doing in those communities. And I am excited about going to Florida and really preaching the message of resilience and restoration for the Gulf South. And this is my faith that's speaking, y'all. Pray for me here. Keep me in your prayers that mercy, I'll have traveling mercy, as well as when I get there, people will be receptive. We need to plan. If we don't plan, we plan to fail. And so we need to plan for what it looks like for us to be resilient, and not only be resilient for our communities, but also restore our communities back to community again. And I believe that we have just the right people to make that happen in you all. And thank you again for being here. I will pass it on over to Kyle now.
Thank you, Rev. I know our wonderful guest speaker, William Strickland, who is Executive Director of Mobile Baykeeper, will be telling you more about his organization. I wouldn't presume to tell you about Mobile Baykeeper, but let me tell you what Mobile Baykeeper says about William Strickland, since I bet he doesn't want to talk about himself, so I'm going to do it for him. On the website, we learned that our guest speaker is a native of Tuscaloosa. William began his career in the field of environmental engineering before moving into the faith-based nonprofit sector. William graduated from the University of Alabama, where he earned a BS in civil engineering with a focus on water issues. He played football under Nick Saban at Alabama, winning 2 national championships during his time there. He is currently pursuing a Master's of the Arts in Missional Theology at Covenant Theological Seminary. William's love for nature and an understanding of humans' place in it were instilled in him from an early age by his late grandfather, Bill, a conservationist and outdoorsman. He hopes to pass that love on to his 3 young children. He brings to the organization, Mobile Baykeeper, a passion for process and excellence gained during his time under Saban at Alabama. And all of our partners at From Resilience to Restoration welcome you, and we're looking very forward to hearing how we are all a part of creation, that we are not apart.
Well, thank you, Kyle. It is embarrassing to hear things about yourself, but when you bring up my grandfather, I got a little emotional. So he passed away a few years ago, which was a big part of actually how I ended up back in the environmental sector, if you will, although playing a different role. First, I have to admit, I hope I ask for your forgiveness for some of the sloppiness of this presentation. I believe Abraham Lincoln said, if you need 10 minutes for me to talk, I need a week to prepare. And If you need 15, I can do it in 3 days. And so this is a 30-minute presentation that I'm trying to give in 10, and I'll try to keep it on time. But, I've preached before, so I'm used to getting the hook. Somebody just give me the sign and I'll shut it down. The other thing I want to tell you, and it relates to how we're going to start, is that I'm glad to see some Black folks on this call, because when I get to preach in Black churches, which has only happened a handful of times, this kind of difference in the way we see the world, not Black folks and white folks necessarily, but indigenous cultures and Western cultures, that comes into play. So I may talk like a professor, and that's when I go to a Black church, they loosen me up because they encourage me with an amen, and then I can get to preaching a little bit rather than,
Amen.
there you go.
Well,
Thank you. So I'm going to be teaching more than preaching. I'm going to share my screen now. Well, before I do, I want you to think back about the first time you engaged with the Christian faith. Maybe you were a young child like me. Maybe you were an adult. Maybe you had never been in a church before. I don't know what it was, but for me, and I'm going to try to share my screen now. I don't have any text in my presentation. This is kind of what it looked like for me. And I bet a lot of you is familiar scene here. Bible study, Sunday school, our chairs are all facing forward. You see some folks are taking notes. People were teaching me things. They were teaching me principles. They were teaching me theology and a system of theology. And I am not here to say that that's bad. I was really grateful for that. And kind of took it to its extreme. I grew up in a Methodist church, liked logic, ended up getting a master's degree. So I'm finished with that degree now from a Presbyterian seminary. You don't get much more systematic or classroom than the Presbyterian. So this is what I'm used to here. But while I was getting my degree, I plugged into what's going on with the environment and faith. And really, I was working cross-culturally. So my brothers and sisters in South Asia and East Africa and the Middle East helped me with this, because they were seeing things different than I was. And I think I started out by saying, well, they're wrong and I need to teach them. And then I walked away from that going, not that one of us is right or wrong, but rather I need to learn from them because they're seeing things that I'm completely missing. So to contrast this is really the way in which our faith was born. Before our Jewish brothers and sisters wrote these things down, they were telling these stories around the campfire. They were talking about Adam and Eve and all that happens in Genesis. They were talking about Abraham a lot, right? And so often when I give my longer version presentation of this presentation, I'll say, I won't start talking about our faith yet. I'll take out an origin story of usually a Native American faith, and I'll read it to them. And I do that because American audiences often think of Native American faith as mystic and somehow connected to the world in a different way than our faith is. And I want to get them in the mood, right? So I get them in the mood, and then I say, well, now I'm going to read you a different story. I'm going to tell you a different story. And I tell our origin story from Genesis. There's usually a lot of eyebrows raised because they realize for the first time, there's more happening here than first meets the eye. It's not that we're teaching it like this. Here's what happened. Here's what that means, right? It's rather we're catching things from a story. And one of those things that you'll catch when you're reading it from the story is that our origin story, and really the whole of our scripture, is one of reciprocity with the rest of creation. And so you can imagine, here's a better shot of what might be happening here in the desert. They're wandering in the desert and telling stories about Abraham and their forefathers. Moses is maybe leading the group, or maybe better yet, Aaron. And they're talking about how God created the earth and he made us as a part of that. Now, I'm not saying that the Israelites had it right. We know from reading the Old Testament that they got a lot wrong, right? There was some great stuff God set up for them, and they didn't exactly follow it. I wrote my thesis on the book of Leviticus, and I have found that giving a presentation on my thesis, I get a lot of snoozes because Leviticus is not everybody's favorite book. But it's interesting to me that the law itself is set up to have a people live in reciprocity with a particular landscape. And that landscape is the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East. And so this is a photo of what it looks like now. And I don't know the details of this, specifically what's going on in this photo, but I do know from my research that if the Israelites or whoever's living in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East were to live according to the Torah, according to the book of Leviticus, in regards to the land, that they would have ample food from that land without doing damage to it, right? And so that's something that we're missing. I never heard that before. And in fact, when I came up with that hypothesis, I went out to try to find other examples. And there were a few people that have done this research before, but largely it's been missed. And the reason for that is we don't think of ourselves as a people with the rest of creation. And the reasons for that are, well, let me go back here. The reasons for that, and there's a plethora, but I'll focus on a few in particular, is that the Greeks came up with this way of thinking, and that it separated our minds from our bodies. And we often don't think of ourselves as whole people, right? Our souls or our minds, they're going to go to that good place, and that our bodies, they're limited, right? And so they'll stay here and rot in this bad place. That was a thought that came out of Greek thinking. We also separated ourselves from the rest of creation. And obviously, we're the pinnacle of creation. Now, creation may not have been the term used there, but we're the pinnacle. And we have these different features than the other creatures that make us better and or separate. And so often when I deliver this message, and again, I'll try to shorten it a little bit, this is about the time that those people that are in the faith, that maybe have a more liberal political identity, that's when I start to get the amens for them. And more likely than amens, it's a get them, right? Because we're going to paint our opposition, the people with a different political identity than us, as, well, that manifests destiny idea, or those people here today that are thinking of themselves as Christians, but separate and better than creation. We can extract resources for it, for our wealth, and that all that really matters is that a soul ends up in heaven. And we're saying that's wrong, and those people are bad. And so, if you're thinking that, that's fine. I'm going to challenge you here in a minute. If you are somebody that's on this call with a different political identity than I just mentioned, then be challenged by that. Think about yourself as a part of creation, not better than it to extract resources from it, but rather a steward. And in that way, we're lower than the rest of creation. If you think about it, we're servants, right? We've been given that servant leader role to take care of it. But I do want to challenge those with more of a liberal political identity, because this gets on my nerves all the time. I hear it. What we've done is we've reacted to some of this Enlightenment thinking, and we've said, we're not better than creation. In fact, we're worse. We humans are bad. And so if humans were just removed from creation, then everything would go back to the way it's supposed to be, right? This idea of untouched wilderness is the ideal. And that also is an idea that comes out of Greek thought. That's not from our Jewish forefathers. They didn't think that way. They thought of themselves as a part of the origin with a role to play. And so I want to challenge that. As you're talking about it, as you're thinking about it, try to stretch your imagination for whatever the future is of your environment, to include humans, and not just include them in a way where maybe there's less of us and doing less damage, but in a way where humans can flourish in harmony with the rest of creation. That takes a lot of creativity. It takes some more imagination. And so here we are. This is a campfire along the Gulf Coast here where I live. And I'm going to tell you just a brief, something we've been working on to try to tell this narrative, right? So all people of faith, or people not of faith, have an end game in mind. We call that eschatology often. And so I want to present kind of an environmental game for the Gulf Coast of Alabama. All right. So we're sitting here, we're looking out on Mobile Bay, if you will. Maybe we're drinking a beer. maybe we're cooking some hot dogs, maybe we're eating a bag of crawfish, something like that, and we're telling stories. And it's shaping us, right? And so the future that we can imagine is not one where there's less people doing less damage, but rather maybe we tell a story like this. You know, someday we will work in harmony with the bay, the delta, the marshes around us. Our oysters will return and our seagrasses will return, and they'll do their job of filtering out the water. We'll begin to have clear water again. Of course, when the seagrasses return, that'll create a nursery for more of the fishery. And so even though our great-grandfather caught tarpon in the bay, we'll be able to catch tarpon in the bay someday as well. And yeah, the sea level rose some back in the mid 21st century. But because we were able to work together with our environment, we're actually a lot more resilient. Those storms that come in don't destroy us like they did in the year 2100. In fact, we've got these natural barriers of oyster reefs protecting us. We're still able to make a living on the water, actually. People will come down to see all that we have. The ducks darken the sky. Those people that want to enjoy duck hunting and do less damage than eating farm-raised chickens, they come down here and they take their limit, not too much, not too little, and they pay their due to add habitat for those ducks. And so this is I could go on and on, but for the sake of time, I'll stop there. This is the kind of future we want to paint for ourselves. It includes human flourishing. It includes the ability to have more people, not less people living here along the Gulf Coast of Alabama. It includes resiliency. It does also include an idea of some of the facts, some of the things that are hard to face, that we are facing worse storms. Here on the coast, we are facing sea level rise. But we can do something about this. And I find when you cast that vision for the future, that eschatology, that you get a lot more people buying into it. You don't create that polarization that says, well, humans are bad, and so there just needs to be less of us. You don't create that polarization of, oh, this is some environmental nut. We just need to worry about getting more souls up into the clouds and this earth be damned. And I don't think there's many folks in this group like that, but hopefully there's a couple that can be challenged. But there's a third group as well that kind of message really touches. And those are the folks that are usually left out of this conversation. It's those people that don't have any imagination for working in harmony with the rest of creation because they've been disconnected from it. Usually that's the oppressed. And so I would be remiss if I didn't include just a bit about how poverty is really a big cause of a lot of this environmental degradation and lack of resilience. So poverty, sin, oppression, worship of mammon, however you want to word that kind of thing, that system has to be undone, and we have to give those people an imagination for how they can too live in harmony with the rest of creation, much like they remember their grandfathers and great-grandfathers doing. But we don't want to go back to something that they have. We want to have something better for the future. So anyway, that's my little talk. I went over 10 minutes. But any questions you guys have, I'd love to tell you more about Baykeeper, but I figured today it would be more important for us to see ourselves as a part of creation, for us to challenge ourselves with some of the assumptions we have of removing ourselves so this idyllic wild place could happen. There's a way in which we can work together.
Actually, you were spot on, William. And I'm going to ask the first question, and that is, if you weren't worried about time limits, what is one more thing you would want to tell us? And then we'll get to everybody else's questions.
Well, I mean, one of the easier to tell you, that's a hard one. Reading the story of, I take usually a tribe from New York State, is really impactful and eye-opening for people, because I never viewed our creation story as a tribal story that was told around a campfire about how the earth began. I viewed it as almost a science textbook because that's how it was taught to me. So drilling a little bit deeper into those deeply held beliefs that we have.
Well, let's open it up. Folks, feel free to use the Q&A button on your screens if you can see that, or chat with us, text us. We will happily open this up for other questions. Or raise your hand.
I'd love to be able to toss out the first question to Mr. William. maybe I should say Rev. I actually would like to know some about mobile baykeepers, but I'd like for you to frame that in the conversation of resilience and restoration. So how can mobile baykeeper help communities in being more resilient? How can mobile baykeeper help communities in restoring back to community?
I mean, I'm trying to select just one. So in our area, we have a lot of communities that have historically, I mean, really every community here was here because of the water. That was how they made their living. In the last, I'll put a 60-year limit on. In the last 60 years, we've disconnected the majority of those communities from being able to make their living from the water. And there are some that are making a lot bigger living on the water than they were at that time. So water access is extremely important for those communities. Now, not just, oh, I can go out recreationally and do something water access, but rather, I mean, there are subsistence fishermen from the Black community in North Mobile, still to this day, that go catch fish to feed their families. There's currently a fish consumption advisory on the Mobile River in which they fish that says, do not eat any fish, 0. So a lot of fish consumption advisories say, you can eat 2 meals per week or 1 meal per week, or don't eat largemouth bass. This river says don't eat any. And nobody knows it. I mean, really, nobody knows that. So making that awareness is a part of it, but then making it to where those people can eat. And that's, I mean, these are people that are eating it to survive, but that affects the church fish fry, right? Like that affects these cultural events. There's another community called Bayou La Batterie. Their whole industry is seafood. After the oil spill in 2010, I believe, that really affected their community tremendously. There was a lot of money poured into that community after that. But the fishery has not rebounded in the way that it should have. The oystermen down there, this is not BP oil spill, but the way we've destroyed our oystery. So these folks can't make a living doing it, and not just make a living. Again, their cultural fabric is being shifted because the fishery is being killed. So Baykeeper, we've got 5 indicators for success for us long term. I mean, our vision, we'll know we're successful when no one has to question if the fish are safe to eat or the water's safe to swim in, when our oysters and seagrass beds return, and when our community takes responsibility for the health of the water. And so the last one's a little bit difficult to measure. The other 4 you can measure scientifically, and acreage of seagrass and things like that. But if those things happen, I mean, we chose them because a wide audience gets behind those sorts of things. They represent all kind of human health issues, all the carcinogens that come down our streams, the heavy metals in our fish, the bacteria come from our waters. So anyway, I could go on, but I just mentioned 2 in particular. So restoring seagrass affects the fishery, getting heavy metal pollution out affects fish consumption, but really access for everybody, access to clean, healthy water, that restores those cultural. But let me jump one more thing. So that's resilience in terms of cultural and poverty and things like that. In terms of storm resilience, the same thing though, like I mentioned in my eschatology there, eschatological future, whatever, oysters and seagrass and natural shorelines protecting us from storms. And my predecessor at Baykeepers, the resiliency officer at the city of Mobile now. So we're the only city in Alabama with the resiliency officer. So she's working every day. They haven't created a plan yet, but they're working on a plan to be resilient against storms, things like that.
Amen, William. Stephen Gooseman asked, obviously from ecumenical origins, how did you make the connection from secular make the connection to secular environmentalism?
Well, I would say I didn't. I'm not doing secular environmentalism. I'm doing environmentalism in the name of Jesus Christ, right? Like, and I don't say that at really any, unless I'm at a church or something like that. It's not that I'm ashamed of it. It's just that it creates barriers, because then you got to go into a whole long explanation as to what that means. So to me, this is a faith move. As I mentioned, my grandfather passed away. I was running a faith-based organization, and I said, like, this is a part of my faith. It's a part of my origin story with my grandfather. And so getting back to that root was important to me.
Thank you, William. Rhoda, whom I believe you know, Rhoda Vanderhart asked, at Gulf Coast Creation Care, we are developing a relationship with the Africatown leadership and hoping to do some energy efficiency work there. Yay, yay, Rhoda, yay. We are indeed. So say we all. Does Baykeeper have any projects or initiatives that involve the Africatown community?
And
Yeah,
I would like to add to that question. Are y'all looking to seek out to be involved in other rural areas in Alabama?
well, in coastal Alabama is where we work. We have to limit our scope. I'm looking through who's on the call here. So give me 1 second so I can see what, if I say what I really want to say. So yeah, I can say it. Historically, we've had not a good relationship with Africatown or the Black community in Mobile. Not because there's been overt racism or anything like that, but rather often when you're doing really good work and you are having some success like Baykeeper has, you maybe don't listen as well as you should to communities that don't seem to, Africatown for a long time now hasn't had direct water access. And anyway, but to answer your question, Rhoda, yeah, but it starts at the relational level. So I've been hanging out with Joe and Ramsey quite a bit, and others, but those are my main two folks. And there's some stuff working in the background. We've helped them apply for grants. We have an AmeriCorps member that is in our grant that's beginning work with them to do litter cleanup. And we may get creative with what litter cleanup means to be able to be really effective. But I think the sky's the limit there. One place in particular that you'll know that we're talking about is Hog Bayou, and then there 3 Mile Creek right across from the lumber mill or the lumber treatment facility. So those two places is where we're kind of starting to see if we can't get some work going. But really, it's about embedding ourselves in the community. I mean, Ramsey's already doing community organizing. We don't have to do that. We can add our weight behind what he's doing. Thanks. I see you're happy to hear it. Good. I'm glad.
And Garrett asked, Garrett Kennedy, how can communities suffering from oppression become more connected to the environment? It's hard to imagine a better future if you're fighting to survive every day.
I think you're right. I think it's a both and simultaneous. We go, well, first we'll alleviate the poverty or get them out of oppression, and then we'll bring in environmental connection. I see them as so deeply connected because a part of poverty is you begin you're just focused on surviving every day, right? So a part of that is there's this poverty of the mind that happens, that does happen to all of us when we're fighting to survive, and it's hard to use your imagination to get out of it. There's certainly people do, because people are resilient, but so I think it happens at the same time. I also want to say we often think of connection to the environment as recreational, and it's so much more than that. So if you grow a garden, that's connection to the environment. If you look outside and like the bird, I mean, it could be you live in the concrete jungle and there's a bird and you watch it, and that's something that you do. That's connection to the environment. But also like drinking water. I mean, Pritchard in our community is having a tough time with their water facilities, both drinking water and sewage. And, that's a whole systemic thing, but we saw what happened in Jackson, Mississippi. So that's what I mean is, but yes, we have to address the core issues. We can't continue to oppress communities and then say, well, go fishing and that'll solve all your problems. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying a part of solving those problems is giving access to fishing, is making sure we have clean drinking water and a place for our sewage to go and stuff like that. And it's not just places like inner city, like here in coastal Alabama. I can't remember who mentioned it, but rural areas, like that's often where deep poverty is for us too. So those people they're living in the woods, so they're connected to the environment, but not able to have access to things that protect the environment, like a proper sewer system.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat or Q&A, but we do not want to cut this short while we have our guest speaker.
Well, I think I can continue the conversation a little bit further. Brother William, let me ask you, how does community get involved in helping Mobile Baykeeper?
Well, I mean, that's something that we have to work on. So we've got to do a better job of making it to where people can connect at all levels. I mean, one thing that we can all do is vote, and we can vote and demand that our politicians on every side make this a priority, right? Like, there's lots of things that shouldn't be a partisan issue that we're making partisan right now. But vote, demand that your politician makes it an issue that they solve. Write your senator, call your senator. We do litter cleanups all the time. And you know what? I'll say, like, those things are helpful because litter's a problem. But the best thing that does is it gives people ownership. What else can people do? They can make the decision every day to consider their impact on their local waterways or their air or whatever it might be. And so I've got 3 little kids, and sometimes I don't wash out all my plastic to recycle, because when I say I mean us, because we're stretched our wits end. So there's folks that are doing way worse than I am. I'm not asking everybody to ride their bike to work and, use metal straws, but I am saying that consideration and do what you can, do that a little bit better. I mean, that's we got to have a culture shift. It's not going to be the politicians that lead us, and it's not going to be those of us that do it for a living. It's going to be a culture shift that makes us more resilient.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why I asked that question, is because I truly believe that we can't count on a political system that has corrupted us to save us. I believe the solutions that we need have to come from our communities, and therefore our communities have to be involved. And the reason why we would ask you to come, as well as the others that we've asked to come, is because we really want to know what solutions that we can actually practically do as community and communities of faith, not just having one or the other, but having the two cooperating with one another to care for creation. That was something that you said that really resonated with me, because it confirmed or affirmed something that I've heard quite often, but I truly believe, is that we look at our nature as this recreational toy, and we don't understand that resources aren't everlasting. We don't have evergreen resources. We run out, and if we don't take care of it, it goes stale and goes bad. And so I was asking you that because, or I was making that statement or asking you the questions because I really want us as an audience, us as a whole, to consider, as you said, our impacts. How are we building out regenerative relationships with creation, and not just have extractive relationships with creation? When you look at it, the reason why they tell people not to eat the fish out of the river is because it's polluted. But it's polluted because of the ports. It's polluted because of the industrial pollution that surrounds it. What do we do to stop that? And how do we combat it? Because those that live off the water, those who live off fishing as a subsidy, often are poor people who can't afford the food out of the grocery stores. But now you're forcing them to do that because you privatized everything and you polluted everything. How do we get our communities to understand the severity of nature and its limitations?
I mean, I wish I could say, well, here's how. If I did, I'd be running for office and everybody'd show clearly and then I'd be the one to lead us, right? But I mean, as I mentioned before, a cultural shift, a mindset shift. So a lot of us are forced into it. We don't choose our culture. This consumeristic mindset is there. But it's happening. So if you've seen the film Descendant, which I hope you have, it's about the Clotilda. And if you haven't, it's on Netflix. You should go watch it.
I'm actually here with the filmmakers. That's part of who I'm convening with.
Excellent. Well, I mean, so I think a lot of people I talk to, my neighbors, most of my neighbors are white folks that don't have any idea that Clotilda existed, but they watched it because it's Mobile, right? They were surprised and wanted to talk to me about, man, they talked a lot about the environment and pollution problems. And I didn't think that's what it was going to be about. So it's happening. So folks like Ramsey Sprague and Joe Womack and the folks in Africatown are doing that. They're lifting our cultural eyes and saying, hey, let's choose something different rather than believing that false dichotomy of jobs versus the environment or whatever. Like we want this out of here. We don't need those jobs. We can get different jobs. But it is hard. Like, I don't want to speak for folks that can't afford the food in the grocery store, right? Like, it ain't no simple solution for them.
Right.
You know, folks talk about, and I'm for like single-use plastic bans and stuff like that. Great. However, oftentimes when we do that, the folks that have the biggest, it affects the most, are the folks living in poverty. They don't have the time to remember, not just remember, but to have their reusable bags and, you know, all these different, you know, we got time and energy to think about it. You're thinking survival, you run into the store, they give you a plastic bag, you use it 6 times for something else. So it's complex. And so I think admitting it's complex is important. But we do have to continue to pressure our politicians though. Like, I don't think that that's the answer, but I'm a believer that we have to pressure the folks at the top, not just our politicians, but our leaders. Someone in the chat said something about from the pulpit. Yes. Like, we got to pressure the folks in our pulpits to preach this message. Like, it starts at the folks that lead us.
Thank you.
Somebody else asked about education or said, educating the community about the risks, but the simple solutions, community gardens and other agriculture. Kyle, I'm doing your job. I'm sorry, man. Reading this.
You go, William. You don't need a middleman.
So another thing is educating our kids. So we're in, those of you that are on the call for Mobile, we're in Viger and LaFleur High School and Citronelle High School. And we take those kids out to do water quality monitoring, and they get to see the bacteria light up when we run it through in our lab. They see it and they know that there's poop in their waterways running through their community. And that makes an impact. We do presentations in those classrooms because it's not like we want those kids to come work at Baykeeper. You know, I got to find more fundings to hire some folks now. Like, we don't have unlimited jobs, but if you're working at McDonald's, you happen to get a job at one of those chemical plants up on Highway 43, or you become the CEO or the president of the United States, if that's embedded in you, like, that's what happened to me. My grandfather walked me around in the woods and we went out on the water, and he told me I was a part of this, and in a way that fish was my brother and that deer was my brother. And so, you know, getting it into folks early is important.
Thank you, William. And Robin Hart asked, how could I get involved in cleanup efforts?
Robin, I think I'm actually trying to look. I'm not going to do that right now. I think you can go on our website and see cleanups. We do a few big ones, but what's behind the scenes is there's a lot of people doing do-it-yourself. So if you want to do a cleanup and you get 4 or 5 friends or 100 friends, we've got the equipment, we've got the literature, we can tell you where to go, where the hot spots are. And so that's our biggest form of litter cleanup, is that there's somebody, a Girl Scout troop, a church, Lions Club, whatever, that say, we want to do this. And they come by and they get the pickers and the bags and the gloves and the vests and the paper that says, here's what we're doing out here. So that's a great way to get involved, unless you see one that's on our Facebook or on our website that says we're having a cleanup this day.
And I'll add a 10 Alabama water rally coming up at Camp Beckwith, and you'll see a host of options as well.
Yeah.
And I know you've said a little about this. Is there anything else you'd like to address in terms of Lela asked, I would love to hear more of this kind of thing from the pulpit. Any suggestions for how we might encourage our clergy to do that?
Depends on what kind of church you go to, right? So if you go to a church that that does stuff about the environment, or it's pretty easy to just tell the pastor this is what you need to do, and not that they'll do it, but or your priest or whoever. If you're in a church where this is not a thought, or in fact they may be opposed to this, which I've been in churches like that, I think you've got to come equipped with resources that show that we are in fact a part of creation, that our story is not one of principles but rather of a story of a people that live in reciprocity with the rest of creation. And I'm not going to name some off the top of my head right now, but I can send an email to everybody afterwards for my recommendations.
Thank you, William. So there will be hopefully time for another Q&A at the end of the call. So if you think of anything in the meantime, it's not too late. But we do want to transition and hear from our partners in From Resilience to Restoration. So I'm glad to see we've got some new folks on this call. These meetings are what we used to call Energizing the South for Energy Justice. But then we got our first federal grant from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine for something we call From Resilience to Restoration. What the heck is that? Well, I know we got somebody here that appreciates a good sports metaphor, and that is, like the old coach says, you can't win if you only play a defensive game. And oftentimes when we're talking about resilience, as important as it is, it's a defensive game. We're not going to win that way. We're not going to get to the kind of restoration that you have heard the Revs talking about, Revs plural, talking about tonight. And so what is what is a restoration plan? We're working on a national resource. We'll be happy to share what we find, and want you to share what you have in on the subject. We have state hubs, and you're about to hear from our state hub partners. This is specifically from the National Academies, a Gulf state oriented grant. And so our partners in the Gulf states, Florida Unitarian Universalist Justice. You see Jan on the screen now. She's going to be telling you about Florida efforts, and Rev was telling you a little about his upcoming trip that we're very excited about. We have Mississippi Rising Coalition in Mississippi, Texas Impact, Texas Interfaith Power and Light in Texas. And we will soon be announcing our new Louisiana partner with a little luck and keep us in your prayers. But I should add, in a restoration plan, we are there to listen to frontline communities, amplify their voices, match resources with needs. But in our minds, a restoration plan has at least three big components. There's ecological. You heard William talking about the seagrass, the importance of ecological restoration. It can be trees, it can be mangroves, it can be seagrass. There's ecological restoration. There's economic restoration. Any kind of resource or anything more typically that we stick a dollar sign on, or at least an opportunity cost. That's like the access issues that William was talking about. And then there's ecumenical. We, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and People's Justice Council, are interfaith organizations. We work with all houses of faith, and to quite frankly combat the kinds of toxic theology you've also heard mentioned tonight. Jesus is coming tomorrow, it's all going to burn, so screw it. But enough about that. It'll be more meaningful if you hear the example work from our partners, and I would like to open it up to our partners. Let's see, on the agenda first, we have, of course, Alabama Interfaith Power and Light is an Alabama partner, but I'd like to, rather than me talking more, I've done enough of that. I would like to introduce you to Lela Lowe with Gulf Coast Creation Care. So with Gulf Coast Creation Care, they're part of our Alabama team. And more importantly, they introduced us to the wonderful Jan that you're going to hear talking about Florida. But let's hear Lela talk about what's going on in Alabama and the Gulf Coast in general.
Well, thanks, y'all. This has been a great webinar, and I want to reserve as much time as I can for what Jan is doing, because they are doing so much in Florida. We basically are working, as Kyle alluded to, the We Rise, starting the weatherizing program, hopefully in Africatown. We'll kick off with that, and I know that Rhoda is working hard to get that set up. Other than that, and I asked the question about how we get people to talk from the pulpit about these issues, and that's one of my big things, is I want to talk to as many churches as I can. William, you were talking about we have to tell our story. Well, the story we've told from a faith perspective is not lately supportive of the environment, of being a part of creation. It's more we're over creation. And I don't know how. That's why I asked that question. I go to the Episcopal Church, and they'll every now and then let me whip out a sermon or something, but it's twice a year, Earth Day, season of creation, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, we don't talk about it. But that's where you capture the hearts and minds of people, is that they're convinced it is something that their faith compels them to do. So anyway, that's my part, that we kind of work in that arena. So Kyle, we don't have much time, and I want to pass this on to others who are doing a lot with the restoration of resilience.
All right, Florida would be next alphabetically. Jan, to you.
Hi, my name's Jan Boer. I'm with UU Justice Florida. We're really excited that Reverend Malcolm is coming to Florida next week. And we have a lot of different congregations that are going to be coming to, we're going to try as much as possible to bring them together so that we can have a conversation instead of having to go to every individual church. But we are going to be visiting some rural areas and really being able to look at what people are dealing with where they are. So in the first phase of this, we were charged with being able to find those congregations that were willing to serve as the resource centers that we can help to develop, so that other churches can have field trips there. People can go there to learn, and that people can learn how to access the resources that Kyle is working very much on, and also with Avery that are working together to develop these resources. And so we were able to find those a couple of campuses, one in the Panhandle and one in Central Florida. So with our friends, the Episcopalians in Central Florida, and the folks that were the Lutherans that were out in the Panhandle that had campuses that they're willing to plan and work on these resilience plans for theirs that could be teaching campuses. So now with Reverend Malcolm coming out, now we're going to work on where are the churches that are going to be connected to this? Who are the people that have the ideas? And then very much like what you all were expressing in Florida, we've been working for quite some time on listening, just listening and finding out who are the people who have, between themselves, more than 3 people meeting together, coming up with wonderful ideas, very inspiring and inspired that are doing things. And we've been working on supporting those people as much as we can to raise up their voices and connect them to each other. And so with this opportunity going through the Gulf South, that's what we're trying to do. Connect the people that have been doing wonderfully inspiring work, connect their voices together to the voices of brothers and sisters in all of these other states. So we're looking forward to your visit next week. And that's what we're up to in Florida.
Y'all are all inspiring us. And I see we have Morris from Mississippi.
Hello. Sorry, I've been having some technical issues. Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. I want to introduce a new partner with the Mississippi Reproductive Freedom Fund, Miss Laura Roberts. She's the founder and director. And in addition to the reproductive freedom and family justice work, the Mississippi Reproductive Freedom Fund also works in environmental justice, has an environmental justice space, doing mutual aid and rapid response work in the Jackson area around the chronic water and poverty crisis in Jackson. Working to become a community resilience center in the South Jackson area, a low income, predominantly Black area in Jackson. Now, I would like to, I'm sorry if this takes too long, but I would like to just, if she's on the call, let me see if she's on here. If she wants to say anything, introduce herself, that would be awesome.
What's that name again, Mo?
You see Lori Roberts. Is she on here?
No.
Okay, so that's a new partner. I'm going to go down. We have we're working with UU Jackson to establish a community garden. That's the one with the artesian well restoration project. So for public access to clean, fresh water and produce. So every Sunday we've been going out there, working, building the structure for the produce, for the garden and all that area. So we're excited about that, and we're getting volunteers out there in the community to help us out with that. Now, we also have someone on the call. If Katie's on the call, if she wants to speak, that would be awesome. She may not, I don't know. Katie? I can't see it from where I'm at.
I don't have a Katie either.
Katie, okay, we're gonna move on. So we're gonna keep it moving. So working, we're also working with the Family Lou Hamer Center for Change to continue the development of the infrastructure for the community rapid response network in Europa. I can't pronounce this. It's in Mississippi, one of those Mississippi names. I'm sorry to disrespect, but also working with the Immigrant Alliance Justice. Now, if she's on the call, I think we have a representative, Ms. Oates. If she wants, I don't see Ms. Oates on the call as well.
There's a
Shariah Oates, I see her.
Oh, Shariah. Okay, Ms. Oates, if you want to say something about the what's going on there, that would be awesome.
Hello.
Yes.
hey,
I'm having problems with my internet connection. I'm sorry. We live in a rural area, but I do apologize for the inconvenience. But you all were going in and out as the question was being asked. So can you guys repeat that for me? I do apologize.
Yes, we just want just tell us what's going on. I just introduced all of the different networks and different groups and partners that we're partnered with, and just share any information that's going on in that area currently. We know that there's a lot of tornadoes and things going on here in Mississippi. I'm sure in Alabama as well. So just feel free to share.
Okay, no problem. Well, Sheree Oates with the Fannie Lou Hamer Center for Change, the great niece of the late Fannie Lou Hamer. Right now, our organization has been on the forefront of carrying out a lot of the emergency management teams that have been, working with different communities, not just ours, but the surrounding communities when it comes to emergency management as far as tornadoes. So far, our organization has helped over 150 families that were part of, I think the tornado hit 4 of the surrounding counties. Yeah, four surrounding counties in our area. So we've been on the forefront with that, whether it's, been assisting them with food, getting everything back together, because a lot of them lost their homes. So we've been on the forefront with that, as well as it's not only just the tornadoes, but as far as Jackson and the water issue that they had, where our organization was able to send a semi truckload of water up there, because they've been dealing with issues as far as the water conditions, not being able to be able to drink the water that's been tainted. And so we've been out there, sweetheart, as far as feeding the families, making sure they're clothed, giving out different soap, toiletries, tissues, anything that they need. We've been here and standing strong, not only just as an organization, but as a community. So we've been working hard.
Thank you for that update. We're also working with the Immigrant Alliance for Justice and Equality. There's the thing with that is we're working to resist the One Lake Project. I don't know if you all are familiar with the One Lake Project, because that's affecting Mississippi from all the way to like New Orleans, and they're expanding the lake, and in a lot of the rural disenfranchised areas, there's going to be heavy flooding and stuff like that. So that's a huge thing that's going on, and that's what we're going to, Mr. Strickland, that's when we're going to hit those politicians, and a lot of them are being paid off by these these millionaire families that's in the area. So we know we've identified the problem, and we know what we need to do to fix it. And that's what we're doing with the Immigrant Alliance and Justice and Equality group. And the increased risk of flooding in low income, predominantly Black neighborhoods in Jackson. In Hattiesburg with Osceola and McCarty Youth Development Center, East Jerusalem neighborhood, is a Black community in the Pine Belt area where there's a lot of food deserts. They need a lot of health care in that area, and we're trying our best to provide resources there. Big Creole, that is the Hattiesburg, where we're going to be doing some spring and summer planting, harvesting soon. If anyone wants to volunteer, that would be great. And with that project, that we're working with I don't know if you know Vernon Damer, his son, the Damer Farm. They also have a Freedom School there, and we're partnered with them. So gift seeds, there's a lot going on. Gifting seeds and raised garden beds and stuff like that at the Gulf Side Assembly. We're going to be donating raised beds in that area, low income. This is the same story everywhere in Mississippi. Low income, predominantly Black area, where people need health care and they need food and they need clean water. So
that's right.
That's what's going on in Mississippi. And all of these different partners are actually partnered up, and we're trying our best to contained to fix the problem for resilience and restoration. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. We are right at the top of the hour. If you have to jump, we understand. But I also wanted to introduce, we are hopefully transitioning our energy consultant, Mr. Gooseman, to employee status. Hopefully he will be working with all of you. And I think Stephen would like to say just a few words if you have a moment.
Sure. Hey, folks. I'm coming on with Interfaith Power and Light and the People's Justice Council as the technical director of the We Rise movement. I spent 25 years as a remodeling contractor, and along the way acquired a lot of credentials in energy efficiency and green building techniques, and have been in a living laboratory. I basically took a vow of poverty shortly after college to live simply so that others could simply live. And for me, that meant learning to live very low on the hog. So I live on a farm in the middle of Blount County, and I'm completely solar powered, raising my own chickens and my own goats and growing as much food as I possibly can. And trying to teach folks about how to use less energy, because of all the abominations out there, one of the real linchpins is the fact is our energy consumption is just eating our lunch. And we've all got to learn to be more sustainable. Well, we've been living a very unsustainable lifestyle. I think I wrote in a comment earlier that I'll just paraphrase real quickly here. I got into this for very spiritual reasons. I was already, I guess, had shed myself of the traditional trappings of spirituality. And like most of my generation, got really infatuated with all things Eastern and mystical there for a while. But I basically came to the realization that I was a sacred humanist, that I feel a kinship with all of God's creations. And I think it's just an absolute abomination in every biblical sense of the word that we have such things as rivers that you can't eat fish out of. That is just a screaming abomination. So, you know, we got to do something about it. But part of what we got to learn to do is live more sustainably. We got to quit worshiping the gods of material comfort and social status. And that's a very hard thing to do, because the quest for comfort and status is literally in our DNA. It's how we as a species evolved. So the spiritual quest is realize that we're not those animals that we evolved from, that we're aspiring to a higher ideal, but that's tough. So in some ways, I'm trying to live an exemplary life and show people that you can live on a lot less material goods and still be very comfortable. I think I've lived a blessed life. So we're the We Rise movement is a spoke on that wheel, trying to teach folks how to live with less energy and less energy bills, but also along the way, they're learning to be more resilient and more self-reliant, because the less you rely on the Alabama Power Company and the great gods that be that bring you all your material comfort, the more sustainable and resilient you are. So the We Rise movement's a spoke in that wheel, a way to start teaching that. And the real key of what we're up to in the We Rise movement is not just doing what we call home energy makeovers on homes and reducing the energy bills of homes, but trying to teach key individuals in various communities how to do it. So those communities can continue to do that kind of work in their community, with us providing a little bit of remote support and technical assistance. So we're really all about training, and that's kind of my key role. I'm the trainer for the We Rise movement. I look forward to meeting all of you and spending some time. I'm already getting to know the Gulf Coast Creation Care community real well, and we're next slated to have our first training workshop in Africatown sometime soon in the new year. So we're looking forward to that, but would love to come see you folks in Florida and Mississippi. Not a reason in the world why we couldn't have We Rise programs operating in every state in the region and every state in the union. We need to have a revolution of energy sustainability in this country, and it can start right here in Alabama. Proud to be a part of it.
Stephen. Thank you, Stephen. Apologies for running a little over. Let me kick it back to Rev Malcolm or
Sorry about that.
Leah to close us out.
It wasn't you, Stephen. You got it late, but you slammed that thing home. Again, I think what you all need to hear in this meeting is the importance of community, the importance of us working together to care for one another and to care for creation. It's important that you all grab hold to the fact that if we don't do this together, we can't get it done, y'all. I'll say that again, and I want to make sure I'm emphatic with that. If we don't do this together, we cannot get it done. So we've got to do it together. I look forward to working with you all. I look forward to progressing with you all, and I bid you all a farewell and a good night. Love, peace, and light to you all.
Amen.
Bye-bye.